Hi, my name is Mark, and today I'd like to tell you more about Defenders of the Wild that I have received for review from Outlandish Games. Thanks for sending it. And Defenders of the Wild is, you can say, a strategy game in which you play as different animal factions trying to protect the forest and defeat machines and mechs and pollutions that is in the forest. This is a cooperative game for 1 to 4 players. In a second I will tell you how to play this game, and then I will tell you what I think about it. This is Defenders of the Wild during a 2-player game. The main area here is the main board with the forest. You have different terrain tiles. The map is constructed from the tiles during the setup of the game, so the forest looks differently each time you play the game. Here you have different types of terrain and you have different components. You have machines which are your main enemy in the game, and you have to defeat those, or you have to fight with those machines in order to win the game. You have different types of machine elements here on the main map. You have the engines, and the task of the engines is to move around the map and place those silver borders. Those borders allow machines to build factories, which are bad for you, of course, but they also restrain your movement options because you cannot cross the borders made by those engines. You also have mechs, and mechs are the enemy units in this game. If they are placed on a simple terrain tile, they are just regular mechs. If they are placed on factories, factories look like this. These are the buildings from the machines. If any mech is placed on a factory, it becomes a sniper, and it will try to hit you and deal damage if you perform actions around the tile with snipers. Then we have the factories that I showed you before. The machine, your enemy, tries to construct 5 factories. If it constructs all of the 5 factories, they are placed in a stack here, and they have an option to construct the 6th one. You lose the game. We have the pollution tokens, and they are placed on the board by the factories. Everything the machine, your opponent, is doing is regulated by the deck of enemy cards. I will show you this deck later, it's here, but this is important during your opponent's turn. But there are these pollution tokens, and they are placed on different tiles. Of course, they are bad for your warriors, for your animals. If at any point you have 3 of the pollution tokens on one hex tile, you will replace them with those toxic tokens. And the machine has got this small board with 6 toxic tokens on it. If it managed to place all of the 6 toxic tokens in the forest, it will also win the game. So machine will win the game if it places 5 factories and it should place the 6th one, or if it places all the toxic tokens on the board. There is also this small board that it shows the direction. Sometimes during automa, during your opponent's turn, you have to decide if it should do something on the left or right side. You use this small board. What else do we have? You have your units. This is the leader of your faction. You will use those leaders to move around the map. There are some camps. The goal of the game is to build camps. Each faction has got a specific number of camps depending on the player count, and your goal is to place all your faction camps on the board and defeat all factories that the machine managed to build. So if you want to win the game, you have to place all players need to place all the camps on the board, and all players need to defeat the factories, because this is a cooperative game. And there are some bridge tokens, like this one. There's an action that allows you to place the bridge tokens on the board, and if you place a bridge token near a border created by the machines, you can cross this border. Each player at the start of the game chooses a faction. There are 4 different factions. Each faction has got a different cards with different abilities, and also each faction has got 2 different, you can say, leaders. This is a leader card, and the leader card shows you some unique abilities that you will be able to use during the game, and it shows you the defender cards, the action cards that you will be able to use. So you not only have 4 different factions, but each faction has got 2 leaders, and each leader uses a slightly different set of defenders. So you can say that you have 8 different factions in the game. So you have your leader, you have your deck of cards, these are your defenders, they have different habitat shown in the top left corner. The habitat on those cards corresponds to different terrain tiles on the forest map. Each defender has got a special ability and has got a number of action points that you will be able to spend in your turn. Apart from the cards, each faction has got this faction board. On the faction board you will place your camps. You only start with 1 camp at the start of the game, but during the game you will place more camps on the board. When you remove camps from this board, it will show you how many cards how many cards you will draw cards from your deck, and you have this pawn and you will move it from left to right, and this pawn shows the support your faction has in the forest. When you will do different actions against the machines, you will move this pawn forward. If at any point the pawn meets a camp on your board, then by performing an action you will be able to place a camp in the forest. So basically, before placing camps, you have to gain support for your faction. Here you have space for damage tokens. By performing different actions, the machines will sometimes hurt you, they will deal damage. If you place 3 those damage tokens on your board and you have to place a 4th one, then it means when one of your defender cards dies. If 2 defenders from the same habitat die during the game, all players lose the game. You have those bridge tokens that I showed you before, that they are used to make holes in the borders created by machines. There are only 12 bridge tokens in the whole game, so the players have to divide them equally between each other. If the bridge tokens are gone, you cannot place any more on the board. Then there are also those item tokens. Each faction in the game has got a specific item that it can create for itself or for other players. So you start with this token on this gray side, but if you create an item, you will flip it like this. And items are used for different things. For those 2 factions that I have set up on the table, potions allow them to remove pollution from the board and they allow to heal, and rockets are used to destroy mechs on the board. How the game looks like. At the start of each round there is this organized phase, and each player needs to choose 1 defender card in secret that will use during the round. You cannot talk about the cards with your co-players, you cannot show your cards to co-players. Those cards are secret and you have them in your hand. So you have to secretly pick 1 card, place it face down on the table, and after all players choose their cards, you will reveal them. They have different effects. Some effects are ongoing and they will be used during the whole round. Sometimes you have a reveal action or reveal ability and you do perform this action when this card is revealed, like here, destroy 1 mech in your location. And a lot of those special abilities are only performed by the player who played the specific cards, but sometimes some abilities they allow all players to do something like gain an item, move around the board. It depends on the defender. After all players have chosen the card, after all players have performed the abilities on those cards, then in the player order, each player will play a turn, and after one player's turn, this player will take the top card from the machine deck and perform actions for your opponent, for the machines. On each defender card there is this number on the left bottom corner, and it shows you how many action points you have to spend during your turn. The number is different, sometimes it's 4, sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 2, so depending on the card you have as many action points that you can spend. You will do all those actions with this leader pawn that you have on the board. And what actions you can do in the game? You can move around the board. So you have this pawn, and by spending one action point you can move to an adjacent hex. But there is a catch, that if you played a defender card that corresponds to a specific habitat and you want to move on this habitat, you can basically skip all those tiles that are the same as the habitat of your chosen defender. So playing a defender with a specific habitat allows you to move further than one adjacent hex. Another thing you can do, you can build your camp. As I said earlier, if you gain enough support and the support pawn stands near one of the camps on your board, you can take this pawn and you can place it on your tile. This tile needs to be of the same type, habitat type, than your faction. So the purple faction must build camps on mountains, and the blue faction must build camps on, I don't know, it's swamps or lakes. So and also if you want to build a camp, the hex must be empty. I mean, there can be no mechs and no pollution tiles. So you have to defeat all enemies and you have to remove all the pollution before you can build a camp. If you build a camp, you will reset this support pawn on your player board, but as a bonus you will draw cards up to the number shown below the removed camp from your faction deck. Another thing that you can do, you can heal. If you are in your camp or if you are in a camp of other players, you can spend one action point to heal, and then you will remove all damage from your player board. Next thing you can do, you can regroup. So it means that if your leader is somewhere on the board, the leader can return to any hex tile with your camp. So you can spend 1 point to regroup. And then there are some actions that you can do against the machines. By spending one action point, you can remove one pollution token. If you remove pollution, you will move your support tracker one space up. Then you can destroy a mech. If you are in a spot with a mech, you can destroy it. Again, you will gain support by doing this action. You can breach a wall. If you are in a space with a wall and you have still some breach tokens left, you can make a breach in the wall. You will gain support. And the third thing is that you can try to rewild a factory. If there is a factory built somewhere on the map and there are no pollution tokens on the factory, no enemy mechs, you can rewild this factory, you will flip it, and this is not a factory anymore. You have destroyed this factory. And this is one of the goals to win the game, because to win the game you have to build all your camps on the board, but also you have to rewild to destroy all factories that machines manage to build during the game. Destroying mechs, removing pollutions, destroying factories and breaching walls, all of those actions will gain you support that is required to build more camps. But there is one important thing. If you perform your action on any tile with an enemy mech or adjacent to enemy snipers, you have to roll this damage die. If there is a sniper nearby, only this symbol matters, and this means that you got 1 damage. But if you perform an action on a tile with an enemy mech, then this symbol can give you 2 damage. So if you fight with a mech, this symbol gives you 1 damage, this one gives you 2 damage, there is only 1 blank side on this die. But if you're adjacent to snipers, only this symbol is important for you. And this is how you get damage by performing actions on a space with enemy mech. After you have performed all your actions, you will take the top card from the enemy deck and perform actions for the machines. And in this deck are basically 3 types of cards. There are cards for mechs, for engines, and for factories. So let's start with mechs. If you draw this card, it means that each engine deploys 1 hunter. So each of these engines, there are 2 of them on the board, they can be never destroyed. They will place 1 mech on the board, and all mechs on the board will try to get to your leader or to leaders of other co-players. So mech card creates more mechs on the board. Then there's engines, and if you get this card, you have to move each engine 2 spaces on the board around those hex borders. They go sometimes left or right, depending on this direction board here. If they move, they leave the silver borders behind, and they are bad because if they manage to surround a hex from all sides with the border, then machines will be able to build a factory. So engine card basically move the engines and they create more borders. And then there is the factory cards, and if there is a hex on the board that is surrounded from all sides by a border, the machines take the top factory card and they place it there. They add the sniper mechs on top of it. If there is no option to build a new factory, then the factories will spread pollutions. Each factory tile has got these small icons here, maybe you cannot see it in the camera, but basically on each factory site there are 3 sites that will spit pollution around a factory. So each factor on the board will create more pollution. If there are 3 pollution tokens on 1 hex, you replace it with these toxic tokens, and 6 toxic tokens on the board means that you have lost. There's also this reboot card that is basically the same as the factories card, but it will change the direction on this board. If this deck runs out of cards, you have to reshuffle it and continue playing. In this deck here, all the cards are the basic cards, but in the game box you have the dangerous cards as well. So before you start the game, you can replace some of those basic cards with the more dangerous cards, and the game becomes more difficult. So you can adjust your difficulty level by giving the machines more dangerous action cards. And this is basically how you play the game. Your goal is to destroy factories and to build camps, and the machines, they want to build factories and they want to spread pollution on the board, or they want to kill your defenders. If they manage to kill 2 defenders of the same habitat, you also lose the game. So this is basically the multiplayer game. If you play solo, the rules are mostly the same, because you play against the machines and they are operated by this machines action deck. The difference is that you have to play with 2 factions. You cannot play true solo with just 1 faction. You have to use 2 factions, but you only have 1 hand of cards. And those cards are, of course, they are not secret, because you don't have to hide them from other players. So in your hand, you will have cards from 1 faction and from the other faction. It changes during the game, depending on your actions and depending on the things that you do in the game. But at the start of each turn, you will choose 1 of the cards from your hand, and depending on the faction that you have chosen, you will perform all actions with the selected faction. So if I choose the blue card, I will perform all actions with the blue faction. If I choose the purple card, I will perform all actions with the purple faction. So you can see all the cards in your hand, you choose one card, you perform all the actions, and at the end of your turn you take the top card from the machine's deck and you perform actions for the machine. So basically the main difference is that you only have one hand of cards, but still each faction has got a separate deck and separate discard cards, because sometimes you take cards from one faction and sometimes from the other. To win or to lose the game, there are the same conditions if you play the game solo. And this is basically how you play Defenders of the Wild. So I have written down some pros and cons of this game, and the first thing that I really like is that it has got modular boards. So every time you play the game, the forest looks different. You construct it during the setup, and this is really cool because it adds to replayability. You have different layout of the forest each time you play the game. Another really cool thing is that you have 4 asymmetrical factions, and additionally each faction has got 2 leaders. So each leader uses different defenders, different action cards, because defenders in this game are basically your action cards. So you have 4 factions, each faction with 4 leaders, and playing different factions really feels different thanks to all the different abilities and defender cards that you have. So this is really nice. I love the size of the game, of the box. It's a small box, but as you can see on the table here and earlier when I showed you how to play this game, there is a lot of content in it. And this is a box packed full with components, with tiles, with beautiful wooden tokens, with cards. And this is really cool because it doesn't take a lot of space on the shelf, and it's really easier to take a smaller game like this when you go on holidays, for example. So I don't like games that are half empty when you open the lid. The game looks really, really nice. You can say it's beautiful. All the wooden components, all the wooden meeples, the machines and the artwork on the cards looks great. It reminds me a little of Root, you can say, but it has got a kind of different art style. Basically, the game looks really, really nice. And the last thing that I really like is that this is a cooperative game. So the solo rules, they don't add any complexity basically to the game itself. As you have seen, if you play solo, the only difference is that you have just one hand of cards instead of each player having his or her own hand of cards, but all the rules are the same. And this is usually a pro for cooperative games, that they play solo really nice. Some cons of this game: the game can be random because you have this, I don't have it here, you have this damage die that you have to roll, and sometimes there is the blank side, and sometimes in one action you can get 2 hits. So this is random, and you draw the random machine cards from the deck at the end of your turn. And sometimes if you have 2 like factory action in a row, turn after turn, and the factories, they spit a lot of pollution on the board, it can be difficult to remove it in time. The gameplay is more or less the same each time you play the game, so this can be a con. Of course, you have a lot of replayability with different factions and different defender cards that you have, but the main goal of this game is always the same. You have to build all your camps, and you have defeat and remove all the factories. And for machines, it's always placing 6 toxic tokens and build all factories. You don't have different goals, you don't have different, you can say, bosses or different things that you have to accomplish to win the game. Each time you play the game, you will basically do the same things, but with different factions and different cards. So if you expect a game that is different, has got different ways to win and different goals each time you play it, Defenders of the Wild is not such a game. And the last thing that can be a con for some people, it's not a con for me, because I mainly play solo, and for me using automas, using bots, it's not a complex thing, because a lot of games that I play, you have to use some kind of automa. But for people that usually play competitive games, without any automath. The rules for managing the machines in this game can be a little complicated because you have a lot of kind of rules. The factories, they behave differently, the engines behave differently, the mechs behave differently. They have some list of actions they can do and they cannot do. So at the end of each player turn, you have to spend some time doing actions for the machines. And for people that are not really used to playing solo games, this can be a little annoying probably. Overall, Defenders of the Wild is a really cool game. In a small box, looks beautiful, has got interesting gameplay. If you like games like Pandemic or, I don't know, Return to Dark Tower, games that give you a goal that you have to achieve to win the game, but at the end of each turn they add you some additional obstacles and threats and some things that you have to deal with additionally to the main goal, that you will definitely like Defenders of the Wild. This is everything from me. Click the like button if you like the video, subscribe to my channel. You can visit me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You will find links in the description of the video. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.